Those against say no. Ayes have it. Clerk.
Notice number 28, Minister for Public Service.
Minister for Public Service.
Mr. Acting Speaker, I present the Pacific Institute of Leadership and Governance Amendment Bill 2023.
Honorable Minister, we have a point of order.
Mr. Speaker, Deputy Speaker, there's two voices coming through the microphones. Disturbing to hear or to listen.
Clerk, can you check on this?
Voy a hablar solo. Hablaremos. Voy a hablar solo yo. ¿Cómo está? Ahora no doctor.
It's okay, yeah? Minister, Public Service.
Mr. Acting Speaker, I present the Pacific Institute of Leadership and Governance Amendment Bill 2023.
Clerk.
First reading, a bill for an act to amend the Pacific Institute of Leadership and Governance Act 2017.
Minister for Public Service.
Mr. Assistant Speaker, Mr. Acting Speaker, I ask leave for Parliament to move the second reading forthwith.
Is the leave granted? Minister for Public Service.
Speech.
This one. I moved that bill been already.
Mr. Acting Speaker, I move that the bill be now read a second time.
Make your speech.
Mr. Acting Speaker, today is an important moment for me to present on behalf of the Prime Minister and this government of Marape Rosso government the amendment to the Pacific Institute of Leadership and Governance, which was first established in 1963 as the Papua New Guinea Administrative College. Before it became Papua New Guinea Institute of Public Administration under the PNG-IPA Act 1993. Then in 2017, the Parliament had repealed the entire PNG-IPA Act 1993 and replaced it with the Pacific Institute of Leadership and Governance, or PILAC, Act 2017, which came into full effect and operation in April 2018. In the process of implementing this legislation, the PILAC Interim Board and the management have encountered certain legal oversights, challenges, and gaps in specific provisions of the Act which required it to be amended or repealed. The first impediment area of concern was to do with the transitional provision of the Act that regulated the transition period from the Pacific Papua New Guinea Institute of Public Administration to the Pacific Institute of Leadership and Governance, which were all achieved and not applicable at present. Mr. Acting Speaker, the other important legal and policy issue to be addressed by this amendment is the status and appointment process of the PILAC board, chairperson and deputy chairperson, which was not clearly defined in the Principal Act. Mr. Acting Speaker, the amendment provides that the chairperson of the board shall be the department head responsible for public service, for personnel management, whilst the deputy chairperson shall be a representative from either the National Training Council or NTC, or the Department of Higher Education, Research, Science and Technology, or DHEST. This is to ensure that there is continuity and coordination of the government public service training policies and the coordination of and the implementation and monitoring of the public service training program, which is one of the national government's KRS. Mr. Acting Speaker, a significant amendment in the change of name of the institution from the Pacific Institute of Leadership and Governance to the Sumare Institute of Leadership and Governance, which will now be changed from PILAC to SILAC. It is the executive government's intent and the wisdom of the Prime Minister and this government and the entire caucus to rename this premier government training institution to portray and give prominence in commemoration of the founding father and the first Prime Minister of this country. Mr. Acting Speaker, may I also add that just last month, Papua New Guinea celebrated late St. Michael's death on the 26th of February. St. Michael entered the admin college that it used to be in 1965 as one of the first students, and soon after that they established the civil service. And rightfully, the name makes all sense to honor the father of this country. The only new part, Mr. Acting Speaker, in this legislative amendment is to do with the establishment of the PILAC Amendment Academic Committee, its composition and functions. The committee consisted of professional academics and members representing core arms of training within the institution. The decision for the amendment and the repeal of certain provisions of the PILAC Act 2017 is to improve efficiency of the institute to achieve its objectives and functions as originally envisioned. The institution, Mr. Acting Speaker, will have a permanent board in place after the amendment of this Act. The board shall exercise the power to direct the affairs of the institution with the executive management of the institute. Currently, there are some legal and policy constraints at times that affects the interim board from fully exercising its authority in making policy decisions to ensure that PILAC or SILAC becomes a fully fledged regulatory body for training of public servants, partners, and other stakeholders. Mr. Acting Speaker, the PILAC Act 2017 does not also define and establish a body that oversees and coordinates the academic aspects of the institution. Therefore, it has caused a vacuum. The insertion of this new part in the bill shall establish the academic committee which shall exercise governance over the academic progress and regulations, responsible for the maintenance of the standard of admission, training, research, and conferment of academic awards. Mr. Acting Speaker, I am confident this amendment will improve the institution in its functions with efficient management and leadership from the board and management down. I therefore, Mr. Acting Speaker, on behalf of the Mara Barroso government, endorse the passing of this bill. Thank you, Mr. Acting Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Pomio.
Mr. Acting Speaker, on behalf of the opposition, we'd like to accept firstly the amendment made to the 2023 PILAG Act, and I'd like to make a debate on this particular bill.
Make your debate.
Thank you, Mr. Acting Speaker. The amendment bill of PILAG Act of 2023 is fully commendable. It is appropriate that this amendment is made to have in place a permanent board to direct the affairs of the Institute and an academic committee responsible for the maintenance of the standards, training, research, and conferment of academic awards. Mr. Acting Speaker, while we appreciate the amendments, I must place on record our acknowledgement and appreciation of the initial fundamentals that were set by the Honourable Pila Niningi, then as Minister for Higher Education, Research, Science, Technology, in partnership with Honourable Julie Bishop, then as the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Australia. PILAG Prescient is a partnership between the government of PNG and Australia to support the development of ethical, capable and public and private sector leaders in PNG public service. Mr. Acting Speaker, it is aimed to improve governance and service delivery at the national, provincial and at the district level, encouraging values-based decision-making, especially in PNG public service. Mr. Acting Speaker, I support the change of name to PILAG to Somare Institute of Leadership and Governance on behalf of the opposition. Mr. Acting Speaker, the Grand Chief and the father of our nation's legacy must live on through our generations, and especially in the implementation of the Vision 2050 with the clear targets under the 7 pillars. Mr. Acting Speaker, at self-government in 1973, then as the Chief Minister, the late Grand Chief commissioned the development of what became known as the 8 Aims and later renamed as 8-Point Plan. The 8-Point Plan was a statement of intent by the founding fathers of our nation who wanted to build a peaceful, harmonious society as well as to empower our people. The objectives of the 8-Point Plan then were, first, to increase indigenous participation in the economy. Secondly, equality among the ethnic groups and gender. Thirdly, greater attention to rural and village development and self-reliance, of course, Mr. Acting Speaker. All of these form the preamble of a national constitution, especially the national goals and directive principles. They are very relevant even today, nearly 48 years on after our country's independence. Mr. Acting Speaker, I commend the Mara Barroso government through the Minister of Public Service for the change of the name from PILAG to SILAG. In this, we are implementing the Vision 2050, Pillar number 1, the human development, gender, youth and people empowerment. Under the public sector requirements, that also calls for all senior public servants that must hold a master's degree or equivalent to convert PNG IPA to Somare School of Government. That's according to page 24 of the 20th Vision. Mr. Acting Speaker, it is imperative that we maintain the Institute of Leadership and Governance to give prominence to the agreed Prescience partnership with Australia Public Service Commission, the DHEST, UPNG School of Business Public Policy and TPM. Mr. Speaker, Acting Speaker, this brings me to my next point, the section 26B, composition of the Academic Committee. It says that the CEO shall be the chairperson, the Director of Workforce Training and Development, heads of academic department of the Institute, the librarian of the Institute, the professors of the Institute, and the course coordinators of the Institute. These are the composition that will make up the Academic Committee as been read today by the Minister. Firstly, this is an important training institution. Whoever becomes the CEO must hold a doctorate or PhD level to lift the credibility and the standard of this institute, Mr. Acting Speaker. My view is to take on board and include the appropriate representations from the DHEST, UPNG School of Business Public Policy, to the Academic Committee as well. We must also include the PNG Public Service Commission, Mr. Acting Speaker. They are required under Section 191 of the National Constitution to maintain an ongoing review of state services and to make recommendations to NEC. Our Public Service Commission must review its operations, Papua New Guinea Public Service Commission, must review its operations and contribute to curriculum development and workforce standards in our country. The Pacific Leadership and Governance Precinct emphasized on leadership, ethics and values and supported by the Australian Public Service Commission. The PNC counterparts spend most of their time at the moment dealing with review of personal matters, which they must improve. Mr. Speaker, there is a significant need to review their operations so they align themselves to the government priorities on the human resource development of our country. In conclusion, Mr. Acting Speaker, we thank the Government of Australia through DFAT for the ongoing support, and we acknowledge Department of Personnel Management and CEO of PLAG, and we support the amendment that is made today to this particular bill. Thank you, Acting Speaker.
The question is that the question be put. Those in favor say aye. Those against say no. Ayes have it. The question is that the bill now be read the second time. Those in favor say aye. Those against say no. Ayes have it.
Second reading. A bill for an act to amend the Pacific Institute of Leadership and Governance Act 2017.
Minister for Public Service.
Mr. Acting Speaker, I ask leave of Parliament to move the third reading forthwith.
Is the leave granted? Minister.
Mr. Speaker, Mr. Acting Speaker, I move the bill be now read a third time.
Minister for Higher Education.
Thank you, Mr. Acting Speaker. I support the Minister of Public Service in the amendment of the PLAG that is brought forthwith in observing some of the functions of that institution, but also changing the name from PLAG to CILAG. I welcome the very articulated comments made by the member for Pomio on this issue, and I'd like to speak to some of them. Mr. Acting Speaker, the Public Service Minister has established very clearly and competently the governance and leadership of the institution. Governance and leadership of an institution, not only the CILAG now, or the PLAG, but also in other institutions, in my observation, has become a very challenging, demanding issue for Papua New Guinea. I've observed in other institutions of higher learning in the universities, as well as the technical colleges, institutes, teachers colleges, nursing colleges, etc. I think the same can be observed in SOEs and departments and so forth, and state organizations, that the governance and leadership has been one area of wanting in the country that must be addressed properly, because the overall operations of the entity or the institution relies on the leadership provided by the board or the governing council of any entity. I've observed that, Mr. Acting Speaker, the compromise of the people on the board has a lot to do with the performance of the systems in the echelon of the structure of implementation by the body. It's very important because many times we complain and we find grievances raised by the public of lack of performance, people not meeting the key targets, the objective of the organization. You find the quality declining. And I find that is quite common to the higher education sector that I am entrusted with by the good Prime Minister to look after. I find leadership and governance as a very important issue. So there are two areas that I see that has affected the compromising of the leadership and governance. The first is the politicization. Like me, for example, let me take myself as a case to illustrate a point. If I want in the University of Papua New Guinea a friend of mine or one talk of mine to become the chair or the chancellor, and then therefore I would like somebody, the vice chancellor, to be also my one talk or my schoolmate or my buddy. And then it goes down the other positions that are there. Then, Mr. Acting Speaker, if I'm rogue and if I'm short-sighted, what I would do is I would now use the powers given me under the Education General Provisions Act to push appointment of my friends. And that really has affected, I see, the whole of public service machinery, especially very important institutions like the PILAC or the CILAC we are now referring to. I'd like to urge all of us that we must understand the appointments of those key people at the governance and leadership level, at the board level, is very key because they are the people who determine the operations and quality output and implementation of government policy. And I'm very happy that the Public Service Minister is very confidently articulated on his amendment that is brought before this House, that he will address that and put competent people out there. And I also know that it is the policy of the Mara Barroso government to making sure people appointed are people with credibility, not with political expediency, but those who will be making the institutions and the states that the state bodies they look after are properly governed and under the rule of law, and monies, management, operational matters achieve quality because that's where it lies. The second point I'd like to raise is the quality of the programs or the academic programs given out from an institution. Like PILAC or CILAC, for in this case, now I had the member of Appointment who talked about quality programs, or academic research has come out, and Minister of Public Service mentioned to that. Mr. Acting Speaker, what we are doing at the higher education space is we will not register any institution, an institute or any college or any university that does not meet the standard of registration. I'm driving that quite vehemently. The standard must be the standard that meets or benchmark against some of the best business practices and academic practices in the world over. So Papua New Guinea standards are high at that level. So when you have programs that are disseminated or imparted to those students coming in, or the trainees in the leadership sector or in the governance sector, you find they par at the international level. So that means they can now manage the areas that they put the responsibilities that they come under them, but they only not managed by Papua New Guinean so-called standard or so-called cultural way, but they do it what the best businesses and companies and institutions and businesses and colleges of the world, some of the best world are doing. So they will meet the registration standard requirement under the Marabe government. The second thing we're also looking at is the programs that the Minister for Public Service related to. The programs, the academic programs that are being taught in the institution. They must be properly accredited. Accreditation standard of international standard must be met at those institutions. So, Mr. Acting Speaker, the standard is very important because when you have somebody passing out of those colleges or the institute, the CILAC Institute, you are confident that they will administer as a secretary of a department or as an MD of a SOE or a vice chancellor or a chancellor of an institution in Papua New Guinea, the best they can deliver in terms with the quality output. Mrs. Acting Speaker, let me also say that one of those things I've observed is, let me use the medical fraternity as an example without putting anybody off. And that's a fact I'm speaking, because somebody is a good doctor in the hospital, therefore the mindset and the impression upon one has been, Mr. Acting Speaker, that he would be the best manager of that hospital. But I think I differ from that view. See, the best specialist in one particular area cannot be the best manager of a broader scale of management or governance. And therefore, their PILAG is right there. Therefore, CILAG is there. For those who want to become CEOs of hospitals, even those who want to become CEOs or the vice chancellors of universities must go through this institute to qualify for this accredited, this well-registered course that have been taught in PILAG or CILAG. Like, because somebody is a PhD holder and therefore somebody is, oh, I'm the professor of chemistry. And we say, oh, hallelujah, that's good. He's the professor and therefore he'll be a good vice chancellor. Mr. Acting Speaker, I've observed again, it does not work. You see his mindset. He or she is specialized in that area. And we are very proud of Papua New Guineans who are experts in those areas. But management is different. Administration is different. Governance is different. The rule of law is different. Following process and procedures of governance in public service in Papua New Guinea is different. Therefore, the CILAG now called is the right place to go to. And therefore, I say those who want to become managers, CEOs, MDs, secretaries, or vice chancellors must go through the CILAG to say that, look, I've gone through this leadership training process, and therefore I can deploy some of these leadership techniques in all the institutions, Mr. Acting Speaker. And finally, the change from PILAG to Sumare, CILAG to Sumare, naming after the Grand Chief Sir Michael, I think it's a good idea. It's a good idea because there's another proposition I think the Governor for East Sepik and other members, Mr. Acting Speaker, have been talking about. I think also the Honorable Prime Minister has also alluded to that we should have a university called the Somare University in East Sepik, which I'm also working on to get it done. But to start off, I think this is a right honor we're giving to the Grand Chief, who actually is the first Prime Minister, but also this institution was established in 1963, is around the same time when the Grand Chief went in. And he was a politician around that time and became the Prime Minister then. So I think it is fitting that we call it CILAG, but to give honor to even Sumare, or even other leaders like Sir Julius Chen, one of the pioneers who is still here, and other good leaders who have gone before us. To honor them, it is to give good governance. It is to give the quality leadership. It is to making sure the programs are properly accredited to international standard. It is to making sure leadership is provided in those areas that we find so wanting in our country today. And we should support this. Probably that's the best thing we're doing to improve quality, but also to honor somebody with those qualities when we name after him. Thank you, Mr. Acting Speaker.
The question is that the question be put. Those in favor say aye. Those against say no. Ayes have it. The question is that the bill now be read the third time. Those in favor say aye. Those against say no. Ayes have it. Clerk.
Third reading, a bill for an act to amend the Pacific Institute of Leadership and Governance Act 2017.
Thank you, Minister. Clerk.
Notice number 25, Prime Minister.
The Honorable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I present the Constitutional Amendment Law 2023.
Clerk.
First reading, the proposed law to alter the Constitution and for related purposes.
In accordance with Standing Order 222AA and the practice of Parliament, the proposed law now stands referred to the Permanent Parliamentary Committee on Constitutional Law and Act and subordinate legislation. Clerk.
Notice number 26, Prime Minister.
The Honorable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I present the Organic Law on the Number of Ministers, Amendment Law 2023.
Clerk.
First reading, a proposed law to amend the organic law on the number of ministers.
In accordance with Standing Order Section 222AA and the practice of Parliament, the proposed law now stands referred to the Permanent Parliamentary Committee on Constitutional Law and Act and subordinate legislation. Thank you, Prime Minister. Clerk, any petition? Notices? Honourable members, question time. The Honourable Member for Northeast.
Thank you, Mr. Acting Speaker. My question without notice, I may like ask him, Minister of Public Servants, na Education Minister must take note. There are almost about 70,000 teachers in the country. Some place tablo rural areas, some place tablo so remote areas. Only marking pace blow you me, Lord this la government. He got 3% increase. Why me ask him this la question? Because Narabla Uncle Blumista Blo Karamo in a money boost trade, na me pay him 3%, na me go Kundiawa town. So if one fellow is asking the question of 3% increase, and must go all Narabla teachers throughout the country. Also now, may I ask in public servants, Minister, if he is aware of the 3% increase, law get teachers na allowance as of 2022 to 24. The teachers are not awarded with a 3% increase na allowance belong in. Triple question that's all. Will the teachers be paid a salary increase like any other public servants? If yes, then what percentage they are going to be paid? And if the answer is yes also, when are they going to be paid their salary increase? Thank you, Acting Speaker.
The Honourable Minister for Public Service.
Thank you, Acting Speaker. And I thank the Honourable Member for Must Be Noticed for asking a very important question in terms of teachers' increment of 3% increase CPI based on the public servants' increase as well. Mr. Acting Speaker, I'd like to inform the House that teachers are part of the public servants in the country that we have. We have about 130,000 public servants clocked on the payroll every fortnight. Out of the 130,000 public servants, we have about 65,000 of them are teachers. And therefore, they have also they are entitled also for the 3%. However, the straight questions to the straight answers to the three questions that the Honourable Member has asked. Number one, yes, they are entitled for the 3%. Second, the issue that that my department, the Department of Personnel Management, is waiting for now is for the teachers union or the PNGTA to get themselves organized so that they will sort out the matter with the Teacher Service Commission. Then from there, the process comes through us, to my department, and Treasury or Finance will be able to release the funding to pay the 3% to them. So it's just a timing that there's a bit of issue with the union or the Teachers Service PNGTA to get themselves organized and come forward with TSC. And my department, the Department of Personnel Management, we do the paperwork to assist them and make sure that the 3% is also awarded and paid in CPI increase for all our teachers across Papua New Guinea. Thank you, Mr. Acting Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Gumini.
Thank you, Lord. Recognize him first time, Lord, this time of Parliament, Lord, floor of Parliament. Before me ask him question, Lord, Minister of Higher Education, for Education Minister to take note. Me like to thank you, Lord, Gumini people, Lord, voting me on 4 consecutive elections. First time is 7, 2 times, all Karamigolo court. Nakaingin something come up 2017, me comes in on the lab. No laws may go outside. But Gumini people, I'm proving to this parliament, that to the people of Papua New Guinea and the world, that all truly been voting me all the time. Thank you. Question from me goes law 2014, been got one NEC decision. NEC decision relating to setting up a politics around the country. NEC decision 185 of 2014. All talk by setting up 3 politics around the country now. 1 all and simple politic by come up law electorate blow me. Now since then, no I don't know come up. Now acting Deputy Prime Minister, I am acting Prime Minister, middle of visiting the project site. Law what Nabla program. Now acting Prime Minister been at the time asking me, bro, politics and stop away. Now me pointing go 1 spot grassland, spot of grassland, stop have, no got 1 something. One time, cycle wire fencing, that's what I have no got 1 toilet too, or building not the lab. Also, I like asking the question, go Higher Education Minister, Minister of Education, to take note because politics responsibility been switched between education, higher education now. So that's the reason why I like asking go higher education. Now, me believe also the responsibility fall under higher education minister. Minister, what happened to the politics, anger, the West New Britain provinces, whether construction in progress or all enrolling all Mangipinis and clear. But for Gumini, nothing. Only a cyclone wire fencing. So that's why we like asking the question. People believe also substantial amount of public funds been expanded already. Now there's a certain NBC limited joint venture on MTP solutions. All I think NPC given contract or finish starting construction. But no that one something come up. So my first question is, could the minister confirm if NPC has already allocated contract to start construction? The second question, could the minister confirm or deny that 41 million of simple politic funds were already expended? If yes, where have all this 41 million gone? If no, when would Polytech construction start in my electorate? Question number 3, what is the reason for the delay? Thank you, Mr. Acting Speaker.
The Honourable Minister for Higher Education.
Mr. Acting Speaker, this is very sensitive questions with regards to Polytech in Chimbu Province and in Gumini District. Yes, I agree with the NEC decision that is in place, NEC decision number 185. I've seen that, and I've also got some report. But because he's asking very specific questions as to the contractor, how much money has been paid, if there's been any work done, I don't want to give any vacancy off the top of my head. I will give it in detail as to the questions he's seeking because it is very important. But that polytech will be built and will be built properly through the process with quality. But the answers that I will give, I will articulate more on that. So I will ask him to be patient until next week. I'll answer the questions in detail. Thank you.
I will recognize the member for Karawagi.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to speak in this House. Mr. Speaker, my question, without doubt, is directed to Minister for Government Interrelation, Provincial Law and Government Affairs. I think I have asked this question in our previous session, but I want to repeat because I haven't seen any answer feedback. There was a program called Rural Service Delivery Project, or RSDPP, implemented by the government of Papua New Guinea through local government and provincial affairs. The program was financed by World Bank and Australian government in excess of 23 million. It's supposed to be pilot in 20 LLC in 19 districts, namely East Britain, Central Simbu, Western Province and Western Islands. The program commenced in 2013. This program was vital because it complemented our DSFP and PSI program in service delivery and could give rise to bottom-up planning concept. Mobilization component was done in Simbu. The coordination office was established and launched. Beneficially, LLG have put in their mobilization funding. Mr. Speaker, since today, nothing is implemented. My question is, Mr. Speaker, can our good minister explain what happened to this very important program for the good of everybody? And if there's a stop somewhere, Mr. Speaker, can we have this very important program activated and implemented? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Acting Speaker. And I thank the Honourable Member for Karawagi for a very important, repeated question. Yesterday I raised the issue with the clerk's office if I could seek leave of the Parliament to respond to that question. But that has not been granted. But thank you for asking the question again, so I can fully respond to the issues that you have raised on the 11th, Wednesday, 11th of January, the first sitting of the Parliament. So let me thank you. I would have responded immediately had I not felt ill. That whole week I was not in the Parliament, and therefore I couldn't respond to you to answer those important issues that you have raised. Nonetheless, I will answer that if the concurrence of the Chair, if I could now respond in detail to the questions that has been raised.
The Honourable Minister, the Chair have recognized that we have many members of the House willing to ask questions. Within the time frame we have for the question time will not give you enough much time to express that. I will ask you to seek leave of the Chair after the question time and we can allow you to respond to that.
Thank you. If that is okay with the member for Karawage, I thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Minister. Member for Kundiawa, Gembogol.
Thank you, Mr. Acting Speaker. Long looks have long me. Question to me go long, Minister of Foreign Affairs. On the 13th of January 2023, this year, BBC News reported that the nuclear power plant in Japan, Fukushima power plant, was going to dispose 1 million tons of nuclear waste into the Pacific Ocean. Now, I must congratulate the Fisheries Minister. He wrote to the Pacific Islands Forum to garner regional support so that they can take a regional position on this issue. Now, that's a violation of the International Convention in 1972, the London Convention for international actors not to dispose nuclear waste into the ocean. Now, the Pacific Ocean is host, especially the Western Pacific Ocean, is host to about 1/3 of the world's tuna stock. And we are host to also marine biodiversity that has a lot of value when it comes to blue ocean and blue carbon trade. We also know that the fisheries industry in this country contributes more than 1 billion kina into the government coffers so that we can implement our national budget. So my question to the Fisheries Foreign Affairs Minister is that, is he progressing any bilateral talks with the authorities in Japan so that they can stop the irresponsible behavior that they propose to undertake? Thank you.
The Honourable Minister of Foreign Affairs.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the member for this very important question. Last year in APEC, I had a personal meeting with the Foreign Affairs Minister of Japan, and this question was raised by me to him on behalf of Pacific Island leaders, as well as our country as well, to find out what the situation is with the nuclear or the radioactive water that they plan to release into the Pacific Ocean. He guaranteed that the radioactive water was perfectly treated and could be drunk as normal drinking water, and said that he will ensure that there was no radioactivity in this water at all. Now, that was from that meeting. Then our Prime Minister also had a meeting with the Prime Minister of Japan, and also received a letter from the Japanese Prime Minister stating the same, but has delayed the releasing of this radioactive water into the Pacific until further notice. So the situation is that if they do release this water, there's a couple of options. If they do release this so-called free of radioactive water into the Pacific, firstly, it will affect the people of Japan first. Then it will spread throughout the Pacific. Now, he guarantees the last thing he wants to do, the Prime Minister wants to do of Japan, is contaminate his own people. So after that, I presented the letter to the Pacific Islands Forum, where I represented the Prime Minister and Papua New Guinea at the Pacific Islands Forum retreat, which was chaired by the Prime Minister, outgoing Chairman, the new Fijian Prime Minister, Honourable Rambuka. We brought up this subject matter, and it was agreed that more consultation had to be done. The Pacific Islands Forum leaders, of course, have had experience in this nuclear activity, radioactivity, especially in Micronesia and those other countries. And as of to date, from the agreement from the Pacific Island Forum leaders, is that we will continue to fight to not allow for this nuclear or radioactivity contaminated water to be released, and look at other alternatives that would be better off for the benefit of everyone for the long term. So, yes, member, we have been in consultation at the highest level with the Japanese authorities, with our own Pacific leaders, with also world leaders when we had the ministerial forum as well, with Australia, on this issue of the radioactivity water being released. At this point of time, it is on hold until further negotiation, and we hope for common sense prevails, that an alternative is found out for the benefit of not releasing this radioactive water into the Pacific, so it contaminates our fisheries and affects our people greatly. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The opposition leader.
Thank you, Mr. Acting Speaker. My questions without notice are directed to the Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, recently the Australian Broadcasting Commission, or ABC, has reported an alleged corruption ring that involves influencing the award of contracts in PNG major ports. The financing of these major ports is funded from the Australian Infrastructure Financing Facility to the tune of $434 million US, or an equivalent of 621 million Australian dollars. Mr. Acting Speaker, it has been alleged in that report that this ring involves a Philippine-based company called International Container Terminal Services that paid an allegedly 4.35 million Australian dollars into an Australian citizen's account held in Singapore. This money was used by this Australian citizen, a Mr. Don Matheson, to bribe PNG ports officials so they can award lucrative contracts to this Filipino company to operate PNG's biggest ports, to be funded out of this Australian Infrastructure Financing Facility. Mr. Speaker, we are facing another negative backlash on our country's image, and it is very disturbing when it is an Australian citizen who is the ringleader and mastermind in this allegedly corrupting the Australian taxpayers' own money. It is also disturbing that this gentleman had even boasted, alleging that he has close ties to our Prime Minister and plays golf with him, including assisting with medical bills of a family member in Philippines. Mr. Acting Speaker, these are serious allegations, and it is important that these questions are asked so that the Prime Minister can clear the air on this matter. The first question is the Prime Minister aware of this ABC report and the central role of Don Matheson in this scandal? Secondly, can the Prime Minister confirm or deny that he has asked Don Matheson to pay medical bills of a close relative in the Philippines? Question 3, can the Prime Minister inform this Honourable House what steps has his government taken to address this massive corruption that has plagued PNG ports in influencing the awarding of contracts to this Filipino company?
Honourable Opposition Leader. Honourable Opposition Leader, we have a point of order. Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Acting. I want to point out to the good leader of opposition that the financing package from the Australians has not reached our source yet, and money has not been even utilized for the project. So there is no basis for anyone to say that Australian taxpayers' money has been misused or used in a corrupt way. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Good point.
Honourable Minister, your point of order is in order. I will ask the opposition leader to finish his question, and the Prime Minister can respond in regard to.
Thank you, Mr. Acting Speaker. This happened in 2017, so I think the Prime Minister is capable of clearing the air on all of this. And the last question, Mr. Acting Speaker, what steps are being taken to deal with this Australian citizen who is the ringleader and mastermind in this massive corruption scandal, and this Filipino company who has bribed our PNG officials to get these particular contracts? Thank you, Mr. Acting Speaker.
The Honourable Prime Minister.
All right, thank you, Mr. Acting Speaker. I'm happy to answer to the question raised by the opposition leader. It's an important question for public interest, The Australian ABC has done their investigation or publication on this matter, and so it's important that the question is asked and a response is given, and so I appreciate the opposition leader for the question and the opportunity to respond. I think he prefixed his question by giving some background, and so it is only fair that I, from what information I have, I make some response before I answer the 3 or 4 questions that he asked. Just for the records, the alleged transaction or the alleged involvement of the Australian that is named on the floor of Parliament here, the transactions that is alleged took place before the present facility involving the Australian the infrastructure fund facility that we have running with the PNG ports. This is a good program. Substantial port interventions, substantial interventions in some 6 of our major ports in our country is being run through this facility, and so the allegations that the ABC has picked up, these matters took place before this port intervention arrangements were completed or agreed upon. The port current facilities with the Australian assistant has taken place under my government's watch, but the allegations that is being now spinned took place before that. I think the opposition leader did make mention at around 2017, 2018, thereabouts. Just to give assurance to Parliament and to the country, I've asked the Minister for State and Enterprise and Kumul Consolidated Holdings to give a total investigation and check on this matter, so that at the subsequent parliamentary sitting or through a public press release, we could inform the country in the total background of what happened in the 2017-2018 period. As a reference to a major company that operates, and that company's engagement was secured through the due process then in 2017 or 2018, and that company operates Port Moresby Port and Lay Port as we speak. And to be fair on that company, a Filipino-based company, is operates, I think, Melbourne Port, if I'm not wrong, and some big ports in the world. One of, I think, the second biggest private port operator, globally speaking. Whatever that company did with the person named is not, I'm not privy to that full information. But to be fair on PNG Ports and the current management and the board, we've asked for a total look into this transaction. PNG Port, in one of my statements I've released, is one of our success stories in our Kumul group of companies, in as far as our Kumul consolidated companies are concerned. We are very much concerned that this report has cast a black spot into the PNG ports. It is a proven success story. It sits at the entrance of trade, commerce in our country, and we are very, very mindful of the implication of this report. We're doing internal investigation to ascertain, and if there is any act of impropriety, whether by the operator or by the person named in this report, whether he plays golf with me or not is secondary. I don't tolerate corruption. I don't tolerate illegal activities. You know, I am patron of the Port Moresby Royal Golf Club. As I stay there to play, anyone who walks into that club who's a visitor or a new person, I invite them. You want to have a golf with me? I invite everyone to come for a walk at the golf course, part of my health regimes anyway. So Mr. Madison plays 1 or 2 rounds of golf with me, the person that is named. But outside of playing golf, this report has cast a negative implication on PNG ports. I've tasked Minister for State and Enterprise to review what has happened. He's given his preliminary observations on the transactions. but a fullest review will be undertaken, and that will be reported back to the Parliament. I take this time also to relate to the country and all people who come into our country to do business. You're not here to do business, to break the law to do business in our country. Today, before I took this question, there was a circulation of, in our government WhatsApp on an illegal soap in the ports in Ley, and I sent word to relevant authorities. If it is found illegal transaction, deregister the company and investigate the person. Those who are entrusted with responsibilities to do this sort of thing must run with it. You don't have to wait for instructions from up at the top. And so for this sort of everybody who comes in our country, whether you play golf with me or you associate with anyone, but follow the laws, do things correctly, and you will enjoy to live in our country. And we're getting a full investigation into this matter to check what is happening, and we'll report back to the Parliament. If I could reserve the right to report back to the Parliament as soon as the fullest report on these transactions is brought to us. Thank you.
Member for Kairuku.
Thank you, Mr. Acting Speaker. My question without notice is directed to the Minister for Mining, and I would appreciate if the Minister for SEPA to take note. Mr. Acting Speaker, 3 weeks ago, I was invited, or I attended an extended invitation to a forum organized by Tolokuma Mines' new owners, the Lole Mining Company, at Bluffin Resort in Hirikoari Electorate. I learned then that the company was now licensed to reopen or recommence operations of the mine. And whilst I do appreciate and welcome the news for anyone project to kickstart for our country to bring in the dollars to run this country through our annual budgetary process. My people of Kairuku have an issue with the reopening of the mine, especially with the dumping of mine waste that had actually happened in the last 25 to 30 years of mine operations to people of Kuni, Mekeo, and Kairuku LLGs, respectively. These are people who live along the St. Joseph's Angabanga riverine that runs from Goilala or Tolokuma area in Goilala district and ends up at Oreka village at the mouth of St. Joseph's River in Kairuku LLG area, running through Kuni and Mekeo LLGs. My question to the Minister is, can he deny or confirm that he did issue a mining lease to Lola Mining to recommence mining? And is he also going to look at the pollution issue that my people have been affected with for the last 25 or 30 years of the mine operation? Obviously, the current member for Goilala will agree with me because he visited the St. Jared's School of Nursing in Veifa on the 10th of last month. And he would agree with me that the St. Joseph's Angabanga riverine has got sedimentation built up on the riverbed, which causes havoc as soon as the rain starts pouring in the mountains of Goilala district. He's run through a flood within a matter of minutes, having to run through a dry road in West Mekeo area, and only in a matter of hours he had to go through 2 or 3 meters water deep flood. So there's a real issue here.
We've also had deformed babies. We've had mysterious death.
Honorable member, then you make a short statement and get straight to your question.
Thank you, Mr. Acting Speaker. Well, all this relate to destruction caused by the mine in the last 25, 30 years of the mine life. So with the reopening now, I'd like to draw the minister as well as the SEPA minister's attention that we need to look at the livelihoods of these people. You know, otherwise we're causing genocide like, you know, every other place in the world. So my question to the minister is, has he renewed or issued a license to Lola Mining to commence operation in the absence of all the environmental issues that are yet to be resolved? Because I would invite the minister to look at some world-class safety-cautious mines in the world, like the one I visited together with the late Grand Chief at the invitation. And
Honorable member, you already get to your question and you're going out again making statements. So we have limited time for questions. Just
thank you, Mr. Acting Speaker. But you know, these are matters of importance that we need to get the minister to answer correctly because it involves lives of people. And Kairuku people are people of Papua New Guinea that deserve human rights like everybody else. Thank you, Mr. Acting Speaker. If the minister can answer, as he reissued the mining license without consideration for the environmental impacts it's going to cause again to my people. Thank you.
the Honorable Minister, I think you can be aware that I've interrupted the member so much on the statement, but he's more concerned on what issues in his electorate, so I hope you respond to the member. Honorable Minister.
Yeah, Mr. Acting Speaker, I'm aware of the importance of this question, and of course, member for Kairuku has been a real champion of this environmental issue, and he has the right to be concerned, and he should be allowed every right to raise his concerns on the floor of Parliament, especially to me as the Minister for Mining. But it is an issue that must be addressed at all times on this floor of Parliament. Environmental issue is important because it affects the lives of people along the rivers. And I, as the Minister, some of this, I was not a party to the arrangements, especially the mining license. The license for this mine was issued. It's just that the company went into liquidation. Liquidation is a really issue of a commercial transaction. So if you have no money, you go into liquidation, then you are governed by the laws of liquidation to end all those issues. But it doesn't affect your right, mining right, your license. So that license is still there. And now that the company has found a way out of that liquidation, it is now going into business. So that license was actually issued. It's actually in existence. Just the business aspects as a result of the problems, they couldn't continue. But I want to stress here that now that the company has, I think he's bought the company from the liquidators, and he can now go into business. But I am really, really concerned about the environmental issues that that you have raised, and you've always raised it. And we have to be mindful of that. You are not just raising it today. You have raised it all these years that you've been on the floor of Parliament. And you have a right, and it is important that we address these issues. But I will probably leave that area of the this aspect of mining to the responsible minister. But I want to assure you that I am very concerned about it too. I am concerned because it is going to happen now that the mining is likely to reopen. So we will look at every way possible to minimize the impact of the waste dumping in the rivers. It's something that we should not do, but because people have been given, companies have been given mining licenses and environmental permits, like I'm bound by those commitments and you're bound by it, and all of us are bound by it, but we should never stop looking at the detrimental impact of this. Even in mining areas where you know, we are still dumping in the sea, in our area, we should never stop looking at these things. We must find a way, because it not only affects the environment, but it also affects our marketability. It affects our value in the industry, our value in the marketplace out there. That if we are dumping out there, the oil is going to make it more difficult for us to do business, because the rest of the world is moving on, and we have to move on as well. So I want to assure you that we will continue looking at a better way, and we must look at a better way. But as to the mining license, it was done before, and I'm committed to those commitments that have been made by the previous ministers to companies, and which have now gone into commercial commitments as well. And as a government, we have a duty to honor those commitments. But member for Cairo-Query, I'm with you. I'm with your people, and I'm with your concerns, and I want to assure you that we are looking at every possible way of minimizing or even stopping dumping in the rivers. Thank you very much.
Honourable members, I will recognize the member for North Fly. I think he has been standing through the week and I haven't recognized him, so I recognize member for North Fly to ask a question.
Thank you, Acting Speaker. Very generous of you. Because I was sitting, I didn't stood up. So thank you to Maslow, kind passing. Me asking Lomigo, Prime Minister, Sadlo, Woglo, Bodablo, Indonesia, one type PNG. And I realized that we do not have a minister for border development, but it is more appropriate. I asked the Prime Minister to give probably a response to a few questions that I have. And in relation to the border post that we are doing in Western Province, on record, there are, I think, 2 border posts in Western Province, Sota William, and one in North Fly that we are doing, and a proposed in Middle Fly. But previously we have the Wutung and I think the other 2 in Tumolbir and the rest in Wesipik. The question is this way: what is the national government's focus and plan towards the border facilities? How are we going to progress on the development specifically in terms of infrastructure and the funding arrangement and all this? Now, take the case of the Wutung that we have realized that they were previously developed by successive government under a funding arrangement from NDB, I think more than 200 or 300 million plus before. And you see the infrastructure there are substandard. When I say that is, there's no power running, no water running, no custom service, office space, staffs by staff, all get a display. Antablonga, no trading facility. So it looks like we are going nowhere. And what concerns me is how do we, Western Province, make sure we don't repeat the same mistake and progressing on. So a specific, maybe 2 questions is this. Number 1, how do we have the funding or resource arrangement for the next lot of infrastructure for other proposed border posts? Number 1, do we got the same option of NDB or what sort of arrangement? Secondly, which department do we work with? Is it through the Minister for Foreign Affairs or Trade and Investment, or which department do we report to fast-track this border post development? Thank you, Acting Speaker.
The Honorable Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Acting Speaker. Me amas long kisim question law member long not fly. It's an important question. His electorate right at the border with Indonesia, West Papua. Me like looks how this question that point to important need for us to step up our border interventions. Last December, I was privileged to spend a night at Bensbeck, but before I arrived into Bensbeck, I was at Wiom. Wiom is 15 kilometers from our national borders, and it was rather sad to see military border post that was completely run down and not working. I came back from that visit with a commitment to step up our interventions and support in the border areas. Mr. Acting Speaker, I like also talk thank you, Mr. Question. Appreciate him, members of Parliament. Long give me signing ratification in our border treaty with Indonesia and Papua New Guinea. This gives us the basis for us to go into new treaty arrangements. We will be consulting our landowners along the borders. More so on our side, we'll be consulting the LGs, the councillors, council wards, and the districts and our 2 border provinces to ensure that whatever we need to do in the border areas be stepped up and tidied, and we have one agency that is responsible for our border going forward. That assurance may I give him law house, give him law all border districts and border provinces. The function at the moment has now been called back and is under the Foreign Affairs Department in terms of our border. But Mr. Acting Speaker, we are looking at the border areas in respect to trade from a trade perspective and commerce perspective. It should be classified as a special economic zone along the border areas. On the other side of the border, you have 270 million Indonesians who are a robust place in terms of market for our producers, and we're looking in that context. So the Commerce and Industry Department, as well as the Ministry of International Trade and Foreign Affairs, will work in partnership and also Defense to look into how best we could structure a border area that is geared towards carrying our country's need going forward into the future, because Indonesia, on the other side, is an important trading partner for so long. We've downplayed that aspect of our relationship, and we've always just been seeing them from a political perspective all this long. So I want to give assurance to the member, Vice Minister, who his district and his province, as well as Sundown province and Sundown districts, would be engaged in. In our own government, in the last 2-3 years, we started a program with the border outpost, but Defense Force and the Defense Ministry has been taking care of this matter. But we're looking at a holistic approach, integrating foreign affairs, defense, as well as international trade and commerce and industry to have a multi-sectoral approach in the border posts. We can get it up and running and have trade functions, trade relationship Wainamo Wutung facing Jayapura, and Daru Wiom facing Merakwe on the other side, as well as the middle areas. We are in deep conversation with also Indonesian authorities. In my bilateral visit to Indonesia, those conversations were engaged for trade and commerce to be activated, and for us to have a border use and border sharing arrangements, not just at the traditional crossing level, but more or less at the commercial crossing and government-to-government crossing in the border areas. We will call the leaders from the provinces concerned to sit together as we work on the new treaty with Indonesia for the borders. In that occasion, we'll pull together our focus on trade and commerce and get the place opened up instead of allowing it to remain a black spot in our country. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable members, our question time has elapsed. Honourable members, I'd just like to put every members of the House on notice. I understand that many of you members like to ask questions. We only have 45 minutes in question time. So when you want to ask a question, get yourself prepared, make the question short. I will ask the ministers who ask questions to make their reply short so that we give chances to all members to ask questions within the 45 minutes. The Honourable Minister for Intergovernment Relations.
Thank you, Mr. Acting Speaker. I seek leave of Parliament to respond to question asked by Honourable Member for Karawagi on the 11th of January this year, as well as being repeated today.
Is leave granted? Honourable Minister, make your speech.
Thank you, Acting Speaker. I thank you for the opportunity to respond to the member for Karawagi on this question without notice that was asked on the 11th of January 2023 regarding the status of Rural Service Development Project, or RSDP, in Karawagi District, Chimbu Province, and elsewhere in Papua New Guinea. I then assured the Honourable Member and the House that I will seek advice from the Department and respond to the member in that sitting of the Parliament or later sitting. However, this didn't transpire because I felt ill of that session. Hence, I will now respond. By way of background, I wish to inform the member and this Honourable House that RSDP is a World Bank-funded rural service delivery program that complements DSIP and PSIP projects. The national government secured a concessional loan of $23 million in 2017 from the World Bank for this important project. The Department of Provincial, Local Level Government Affairs is the implementing and oversight agency of this project, which aims to implement tangible projects identified by local communities themselves at the ward level based on priorities and the needs of those communities. The desired outcome of RSDP is empowering and transforming rural communities to improve qualities of life there. For the last 4 years, we have had drawn down nearly 30% of the World Bank funding for a total of 256 project proposals throughout the nation, particularly those provinces that are involved. There have been delays in project implementation due to external causes, such as COVID-19 and the national election that recently concluded, impacting on the overall delivery of the project along with internal challenges. Mr. Acting Speaker, the program is currently being implemented in 5 provinces: Central, East New Britain, Chimbu, Western, and West Sepik provinces. A total of 19 districts and 20 LLGs in these provinces are participating in this important project. Some of 256 project proposals have been identified, out of which 29 are targeted at women's grouping. Examples of this project, community project, are construction of 8 posts, construction of classrooms and teachers' houses, water catchments projects, bridges, community halls, solar power, and livelihood project for women and mothers. East New Britain is the only province that has already into implementation phase, starting with Raruana LLG, followed by Chimbu province with central and western, however, not far away from full implementation of this project. There is LLG counterpart contribution, an amount of 70,000 that is required as counterpart fund contribution. These funds are equally shared with selected wards, and when total project funding for each project proposals at ward level is finally vetted by the communities. My department is working with all levels of government in trying to make systems of government work in the provinces, districts and LLGs, and including wards. And this project is one of the most important interventions to make sure projects at ward levels are delivered. Mr. Acting Speaker, Chimbu province alone has highest number of project proposals, numbering some 53 in total, that are awaiting drawdown of funds from World Bank. A total of 4 LLGs in the province are participating in 4 districts, namely Kumai Bomai LLG in Gumini, Suai LLG in Sinasina, Yongumo, Siena LLG in Suave, and Gena Wagula in Karawagi. The selection of districts and LNG projects were done by provincial administration. For Karawagi, whilst all the wards had opportunity to submit their expression of interest, only 14 project proposals, including 2 women's groups, were identified and selected by communities and approved. During the first quarter of this year, my department will carry out outstanding activities that will need to be completed in Karawagi district and the Chimbu province as a whole. This process is my department to complete Ward Development Committee, followed by LNG Development Committee endorsement. Once this process is completed, then we will move into Ward Development Grant Agreement signing to open ward accounts to transfer funds to start implementing the actual projects. I want to assure the Honourable Member that process of Karawagi will be undertaken in the first quarter of this year. A total cost of 14 project proposals for his district is estimated at around about 1.2 million. Mr. Speaker, I must also inform the Honourable Member that part of the delay is also due to following stringent financial management guidelines put in place by World Bank. And as implement agency, we are in compliance. Thus, my department only receives funds if and when we acquit project-related expenses to the World Bank. Likewise, this experience are also passed down to our communities throughout the country. I hope that foregoing clarifies the status of this project for member for Karawagi. I thank the House for listening.
Honorable members, grievance debate. The Honorable Governor for Isipik. Then I recognize the Governor for New Ireland. Honorable Member for Isipik Regional.
I allow.
Honorable Governor for New Ireland.
Thank you, Mr. Acting Speaker. And thank you, Governor, for Isipik. I actually beat you to standing up, really. You may be fit, but I actually beat you. All right, thank you. I'm not going to be very long, Mr. Acting Speaker. A few weeks ago, we had a big demonstration here of gender violence, and I'm going to try to say a few words just to remind us that there is a problem. The recent initiative in combating gender-based violence, GBV, suggests that how each province, and particularly my own province, should respond and should have a strategy for it. It's no good to just simply demonstrate, see and do nothing. The fact of the matter is it is a very, very important. Gender-based violence is a very serious problem, Mr. Acting Speaker, in Papua New Guinea. All you suffer and you don't know, but they're some of the most patient creatures on this earth. The United Nations Sustainable Development Goals Fund say the magnitude of gender-based violence, GBV, incidents in Papua New Guinea is considered by some of the epidemic proportions. Over 41% of men in Papua New Guinea admit to having raped someone, and over 2/3 of women are estimated to have suffered some form of physical or sex violence. It's very, very serious. We're among the top in the world for this kind of activities. Looks like we're very much on the side of animals. And the report goes on to note that GBV is considered by many in Papua New Guinea to be an acceptable, a normal part of social life, which means that the levels reported are probably low, that the actual levels of GBV are much higher than reported. GBV and gender equality in general are major issues which need to be addressed in Papua New Guinea by all of us leaders who are elected to this parliament, and beginning with the provincial government using its subnational government's power to introduce some form of control. I think over the past years, Honourable Governor for National Capital District, Paus Parkov, has pushed dealing with gender-based violence in Papua New Guinea. He has established the NCDC gold standard strategy to address GBV, which is the first comprehensive strategy developed in Papua New Guinea at the provincial level to address the issue of GBV. The strategy takes its lead from the Goal 1 of the national goals and their directive principles, which establish the goal for every person to be dynamically involved in the process of freeing himself or herself from every form of domination or oppression, that each man or woman will have the opportunity to develop as a whole person. I think Governor Parker called a high-level meeting some two years ago, which brought together members of parliament, governors, development partners, and others to devise a way forward. The strategy seeks ways to introduce information on gender-based violence into education, the workplace, government, the police, courts, the marketplace, transportation, and home environment. Overall, the approach, I think, of Governor Parker seems a well-intentioned and well-thought-out strategy for dealing with gender-based violence. It, Mr. Acting Speaker, deserves the support of all the provinces. The last week we were talking about how we can empower provinces, so let's begin there. It deserves the support of all provinces in the country. Now, standing here before you, I want to give you a bird's eye view that I've taken this matter very seriously in the possible contribution approach of New Ireland. And I recommend that New Ireland take the initiative to prepare its own strategy for combating gender-based violence. This should be tailored to the specific social and cultural characteristics of New Ireland. It should serve as New Ireland's contribution to the proposed governors' conference, which is coming, on GBV. Our chairman, the governor for ECPICS, and those matters suggested by Governor Powers-Parker. The drafting of such a strategy should be the responsibility of community development, which we all have, and law and order sectors, which we should have, but we're not getting it, of the administration, which is very disintegrated today. The overall approach of the strategy should be based on 8 steps recommended by the United Nations Fund for Population Activities, which I'm not going to talk about it. It's a pretty long piece of everything. But why do I spend time on this? Because why are women important, Mr. Acting Speaker? No matter how you look at it, no one here today would be here today if it wasn't for a woman. Our mothers. I lost mine about 48 years ago. Mila Pun, that's all. Gee, I miss her. Women are quite simply the source of life. Women are the creators of humanity. Without women, there would be no people. Now that I think makes women pretty important to all of us. And I want to link that with youth somewhat, because we are the sons of women. Well, if women are the creators of life, then youth are the creators of the future. Yes, all of us, no, me more than you, or Alapuns will be gone. You will stay for a long time, but I'll be going very soon. Or there are some people out there who are praying for me to go earlier. Now I hope you won't get too far. That you'll beat me to the end of the line, really. Now don't get too eager to get rid of us, all of us here. But still, the truth is The old folks, you and me, you're not as old as me, but I'm just generalizing it, will not be around for that much longer unless you have a special road that we don't have. We are all going the same way. So, Mr. Acting Speaker, who will be left? That's why I linked the women and the youth. Those who will be left will be the youth. And who will depend on the youth to make the world a better place than it is today. The youth. All young people belum itu pula. If the youth of the world today do not make the world a better place tomorrow, then I fear there is no hope of humanity. So, I have faith in the youth, and I know they can do it. So it is really a pleasure for me to say a few words on women and youth today, and to emphasize that I'm addressing the youth of New Ireland, in Port Moresby, and everywhere else in this country. They must not get involved in this game. They must discipline themselves. New Islanders you have to be very ashamed if you're part of this organization that constantly denote the value of women.
Honorable Governor.
That women are the creators of life.
Honorable Governor, I'm sorry to interrupt you. Just reminding you that your 10 minutes of debate has lapsed. Allow you to give you another 3 minutes to sum up your debate.
What did you say? Oh, thank you. Thank you, Speaker. Thank you very much, I think, Speaker. You're the only one that can do that. That standing orders don't have it. So
Governor, in respect of you, I give you that 3 minutes. So,
I said, Mr. Speaker, and I want to repeat myself, I can see some of you are bored. I said women are the creators of life, and that is true. But even women create life. For some reason, we do not seem to really appreciate that women do. Why is it that men of the world, men of New Ireland, the province from me yet abuse women? Why is it that the United Nations say that Papua New Guinea has one of the highest rates of gender-based violence of any country in the world? You may not go gaman on plenty talk good play talk, yeah. If we cannot look after ourselves, our human beings, our women who brought us into this world, all get to talk play rubbish, nothing to show. Violence of any country in the world, as I said. Why is it that higher percentage of women in Papua New Guinea report that they have been raped than in almost any other country in the world? Why is it, Acting Speaker? This is just the truth. We should be ashamed. We should not camouflage it. We should not hide it. We should not pretend to say all about all these good things and the resource-rich country floating on a sea of oil or get a gammon nothing if you cannot look after your mother, the women of this country. We are, Acting Speaker, among the worst offenders in the world, and that to me, and I'm sure you share my feeling, that is something we really cannot be proud of. I'm not speaking as if New Ireland is not part of this That's why I began by focusing myself on New Ireland. But whatever it is disgusting. It must stop. Every time someone gets mad at someone else, they decide that person is a witch, and they start tormenting and even torturing them. Well, I can tell all the women here, all the women and honorable members here today, that we must stop this. If you and I don't, then they cannot. They can do a lot of demonstration, but they cannot. But I want to promise you, Mr. Acting Speaker, I take this matter very seriously. My government is going to work on a policy on violence against women. We're going to step up hotlines for women to call if they are abused. We're going to set up safe houses for women where they can live so they can get away from those who are abusing them. And we are going to punish the abusers. I say to all men of New Ireland today, everywhere, wherever you are, if you abuse a woman, you are going to jail. And that's all. Full stop. Why? Because you show your wives, your daughters, your mothers no pity. Okay. You show your woman no pity, then we will show you too no pity. Your house, the right house for you is the jail.
Honorable Governor, I'm sorry I interrupt you
very
again.
much.
You have 2 minutes extra lapse. Governor for Isipik.
Thank you, Mr. Acting Speaker, and may I say to the House that it is always an honor to listen to Sir Jay speak, and I will always be happy to give up my space for him in recognition of the fact that he is the last man standing. And he speaks on an issue that is very close to my heart too, and I want to endorse those comments. My grievance today, Mr. Acting Speaker, is in relation to the economy and particularly in what is happening in the US, in some of their medium-sized banks. We note last week the folding of the Silicon Valley Bank, which funds organizations like Facebook and a lot of these tech companies. And it has gone bust lately. One of the big 30 banks, Credit Suisse in Europe, it's one of their biggest banks. It's also in trouble. And there are many banks who are indicating that they could be in trouble in the coming months. The world could be facing, Mr. Acting Speaker, another financial meltdown similar to 1997. And this is being brought about, as we know, by the prolonged pandemic that the entire world faced in COVID, which forced a lot of governments to borrow, including ours. And the central banks around the world began to tighten interest rates in order to control inflation. And I noticed in Papua New Guinea in the last few months, there's been a lot of concern by the public on the issue of inflation, and many Papua New Guineans don't understand why we are facing inflation in Papua New Guinea, and we somehow feel that what's happening in the other parts of the world should not impact us. But I wanted to say here in the House that whilst we are concerned with DSIP and fixing things in our district and fixing things in our province, we should have a mechanism that recognizes what is happening in the other parts of the world that affect us. Many of us still deny that COVID-19 was real, and we forget that China is only now reducing its tight control on COVID-19. It's only done so in the last couple of months. And China is the largest country on earth, and it continued to take COVID-19 seriously. Also in Papua New Guinea, I noticed that the central bank has not tightened interest rates compared to other central banks. And so the impact on our banks by the central bank is perhaps not so significant as we see in other parts of the world. And just to give everyone an indication of the size of the problem, Credit Suisse will be requiring more than $50 billion cash injection from the central bank in its country to keep operating. That's how significant it is. And if other banks follow suit, a lot of our programs could also be in trouble because we are borrowing from the world and we have significant debt. I'm worried about the knock-on effects. And just to give the House a further understanding of what's happening, as a result of COVID, as a result of the Ukraine-Russian war, fertilizer prices have increased 110% across the world. The two crops that rely heavily on fertilizer are rice and wheat. You will notice that this year the price of rice and the price of wheat globally has increased by 20%. Last year, some wheat producers increased prices by up to 160%. Now, I don't believe we should continue to bury our head in the sand and pretend that what's happening in the global economy will not affect us, Mr. Acting Speaker. My view is that we should be doing more locally. We should be increasing local production so that we can offset some of these things that are happening globally. Now, our people in the towns and cities will feel this impact. And this is why I've been asking a lot of questions about power. The cost of power feeds into the general cost that everybody needs to pay. And as we wait for interventions to happen, and this is where I personally don't want to continue to blame the former PNC government. I think that's an old story and we shouldn't continue to do that. Whatever has happened back then, something before. We should really be taking ownership of the issues now. On the issue of jobs, again, important for the economy, we just don't have the jobs, and we know that. And I recall when I was sitting in the opposition and the then opposition leader, Patrick Pruitt, he made a presentation on this floor where the numbers that he got from the central bank showed a decline of 100,000 jobs. And this happened during the PNC time. Fast forward to today, we still don't know what we're doing in terms of jobs. We've got all these really nice programs. Every district is humming. You've got district programs happening. You've got road programs happening. You've got all these things happening. But we don't know how it's feeding into the economy. We have no idea. Because our statistics is not working. So all the time we are making guesses and we're throwing mud at each other, but the underlying problem still remains. We have more than 70,000 young people finishing school every year. Are we creating 70,000 jobs every year? We know the simple answer is no. If you look at the presentation by the Treasurer, out of the 24 billion kina budget, only 900 million is being targeted at the economy. Now, I don't want to complain about that because that's how we've always treated the economy. If you look at every single budget, the economy gets a very small proportion of the national budget in terms of everything we want to pay for. Education and health get over 40% of the budget. And if you look at all of our admin costs and salaries and everything else, it leaves very little for the economy. And without the economy, we are going to sit back and worry about how are we going to keep the rice prices low? How are we going to keep the wheat prices low? And if people haven't already figured it out, palm oil prices are going up. So the cooking oil prices in the shops are going to go up too. So in essence, the entire basket of basic goods that our people want to use, particularly those in towns and cities, rice, flour, cooking oil, the prices are going to keep going up. We need some kind of intervention, perhaps from Parliament, I'm not sure if we have an economic committee. If there is, perhaps it's time to activate it. We need to be talking to our industries. We need to be talking to those that are supplying power. We need to start bringing the entire cost structure of doing business down. We've got to make our economy more competitive so it grows. Whilst we are intervening in the SME space with concessional funding and this and that, it's actually just a drop in the ocean. It's not making a difference. It might be making a difference to one or two families, but it's not making a difference to the wider community. So my grievance debate is that I'd like to see someone take ownership of it. I know the treasurer cops a lot of the flack for it, but what people don't realize is that the treasurer's job is just to bring in the money. He doesn't spend the money. The spending actually takes place in other agencies. Treasurer and finding money, the sol na karim kam, or not by spending money. So as a member of this government, I'd like to see some of the portfolio ministers in terms of the money you are getting from Treasury and you are using in your departments, how are you contributing to alleviating some of these problems? We need to see that on this floor. And we need to be debating those issues. It's rather unfair that we target the treasurer all the time. Now, work blame lokari monitor solikam. Work blow spending and blow line. So just to get some clarity and then to sort of bring us back to recognize that my biggest fear is the knock-on effects from the banks. Suppose plenty of bank lo Europe na America start lo collapse, now banks lo Asia too start lo collapse. Bibla baksim bagram. And mibla by sinam ta sol na, mibla ekto sa mibla bisilo, DSIP na, PSIP na, building road na, bridge na, classroom na. Something outside by affecting mibla. Mr. Deputy Speaker, that's my grievance debate for this afternoon. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Hiri.
Thank you, Acting Speaker, for the opportunity to address the House on also sentiments shared, similar to those shared by the Governor for East Sepik Province. And the issues I'd like to address is that a culmination of the facts and the state of affairs affecting the globe and our municipal economy culminated into an exchange the other day between the Treasurer and the former Prime Minister, the member for Elu Pangia. And I address this issue as a first-time MP on the floor of Parliament. There are 41 of us in this House, most of who have been prompted by the events of yesteryears and complaints of yesteryears to come into this House and make a particular difference. And as we do this, Papua New Guineans, as a Papua New Guinean, I feel as if we have a very short memory. In the PNC-led regime, everybody wanted to throw stones. Some of us are all in this House today. Again, in this regime, the same very people are so quick to throw stones at the current regime and its affairs and how we're running this country. See, our good treasurer is only one man. Our Honorable Prime Minister, Honorable James Marape, is also one man. And in his time as the Prime Minister of this country, the member for Yelwu Pangia, Honorable Peter O'Neill, was also one man. We seem to be very, very quick to judge, but not very quick to offer solutions. The writings on the wall. Governments cannot fix the population at any one time, at a drop of a hat. But the efforts that every successive government makes are worth taking note of and worth taking the heart to work for this country. It has now been 48 years, and we seem to be continuously doing the same thing, expecting a very different result sometimes. As the former late President of the United States said one day, let's not ask what of the country, but what are you going to do for your country? Ask not of what the country will do for you, but you and I will do for our country. If we so really love this country as we say we do. Rome wasn't built in one day, they also said. The economy, of course, needs our help. I think we can all agree to that. But I think where we are missing the point when we discuss our economic hardships is that 47 years has transpired. We've made constitutional changes, legislative reforms, bureaucratic changes at the cabinet levels of successive governments. And yet, no matter how many changes we make, how many resources deals we sign off, how many big projects we can sign off, we still find ourselves in a very strong disadvantaged position. When I say we, I am talking about the 8 million people in this country, 80% of whom are all in the rural sector. We can't continue to do this blame game, because the point is, people are moving from the rural villages into the fringes of every city. Port Moresby is a clear classic example. Leh is a clear classic example. Mount Hagen is another example. Every urban center has its fringes of communities building and brewing up. We are all running for the same pie. And yet, every time we talk about building the rural economy, well, how are we going to build the rural economy if we are not availing credit to our rural economy? And how can we avail credit to the rural economy if we're not availing securities to our rural economy? And how can we avail security to our rural economy if we cannot formalize their assets in the rural economy? This is why people are shifting to 6 Mile, shifting to Hirakwari, shifting to the fringes of Leh, because everybody wants the same thing, poor or rich. We all want a shelter over our heads. We also all want clothing. We all want a meal on the table. And all of these things require access to financing. Without financing, we cannot feed our families. Our people are going to continue to struggle, and the complaints are going to continue to culminate. And every 18 months, you will want to change the government. And yet we complain about the lack of stability. We have an opportunity. We have just passed the 24 billion Kina budget. A budget that will probably increase the next financial year. It will keep increasing against the very little security that is only available to this country. Our fault, and I resound and I adopt entirely the sentiment shared by the governor for East Pacific Province. We need a very close look at the structure of government. And I say that with great care. I say we need to look at the legal framework. We keep trying to play rugby league on a golf course. We keep trying to put a square pole through a round hole. This is why we keep finding ourselves at the drawing board. We keep trying to do reforms at the high level. But we fail to understand every economy on this planet Earth and the globe works off security. And the security is land. We have 80% of land in the rural sector. When are we going to include our rural populace if we do not legislate or formalize that legal economy? If we do not have proper identification for our legal populace, so that they are not creating extra legal activities, not illegal, but extra legal activity, so that they can survive. But imagine if we are to formalize their local economy, formalize their access to credit, then everybody we will be doing a great justice to our people and for our people. I also, like I said, adopt and endorse the sentiment shared by the governor for East Pacific Province, and then really requires need to look at the playing field on which our budget will be run. when we are running the economy, we must avail the necessary security for every Papua New Guinean to access credit. There is no point in putting 1 billion kina into the NDB so as to avail it to the rural sector if the rural sector is not going to be able to avail the security fundamental by banking principles to access that credit. There is no point. And unless we take some structural adjustments on the legal framework of credit in the context of formalizing customary land tenure in this country, we will be wasting our time and repeating ourselves over and over and over again like a churning time clock. And sooner or later, if the global economy is going to crash, we are going to be dragged with it because we fail to understand our own jurisprudence, our own social units of clans. For thousands of years, Papua New Guineans always hunted and gathered and banked together as clans. Why do we keep kidding ourselves? There is absolute and necessary need that this kind of reform and thinking must be adopted. I also encourage and urge all those critics, because the same critics will be continuing the same narrative even 20 months down the line. Some of the time, talk thank you, Gaman. Let me walk one time. Some of the time, you must talk thank you, Prime Minister Bloyumi. The hard work for those privileged to have served this country as Prime Ministers and Ministers of State will understand that. I also understand some of you do not sleep. So, I'm hard work, man. With these few remarks, I want to say, God, He can bless you in Mogata. There's something to think. Thank you, Thomas.
The Honourable Member for Miduramu.
Thank you, Mr. Honourable Deputy Speaker. Milatok, thank you long. This labinon. Me by making lick debate belong me. But firstly, Milatok, thank you long, God also. Emi giving me pla time, you may stop. Thank you long, God. Secondly, Milatok, thank you long. Honourable Prime Minister Blomi Pla long country. Deputy Prime Minister, one time you may got former Prime Minister na member Blong. Yalebu Pankia. Milatok, thank you na congratulations Blomi go long. All of them all been reading country na you may stop. Thank you long, God also may give him time long. Sir Julician, Sambla Blong, all senior leader, only Lucimi Plapinis, that's all one play me represent him. All name stop until you me long pla time now, God may give him time long and me to thank you, Governor Blong, New Island. Debate Blomi, Milak make him lick and Malsum. And me very important na, and Blong, people block country, Papua New Guinea. One block talk where me like talk long and Malsum. Talk long Prime Minister been making Papua New Guinea and Mr. Pantap long. Very milky land. And we got oil, and we got gas. Na black Christian nation, this pla talk and Mr. Napolsum. Na time, this pla country been kissing Papua New Guinea and me been kissing independent. He got one plus something where Mr. Bakset long. Country long, pushing Yumi long kissing independent. Name foundation belong this country. Name bun, name strong belong this country. Milatok thank you long, Honourable former Prime Minister belong. Yumi long country na member Bloyali Bupangia. Long look sawe belong em long this time. Na samblol member bin Lusim Yumi, samblol staff. Na thank you long former Speaker too. Long look sawe belong em long this time. I'm very important na. I'm belong saving country belong Yumi. You can stand up strong. All got something is stand up, I'm stand up on top long stone. I'm a foundation belong country. Mila make him debate belong me go long. You may all get angel long this house. You may all get you may a Christian. You may sit down long here, you may talk as you may Christian. You may come up later and you may come. All pastor you pray long you me. Come in along this house and only pray long you me. only dedicate him, you may leader go long an God. This house only dedicate him go back long an God. God give him good pla ting long you may long lead him country. But one plus something me like talk long in. You may got Bible and me stop in so long this house. But this Bible and me stop you know got one plus something you protect him, you know got one plus something you me guide him. Me got big conscience long this pla. Bible and me stop in so long this house. You must make him constitution and must go down long. Country na this Bible and me must stop. Law you must guide him na protect him long stop in so long this house. Next government by one him can man by come up you mean no save. Money got different idea, money got different thing by come. All he can move him this Bible go out. But conscience belong me. You must put him this go down long. Constitution belong this country. Now Prime Minister have been working one but talk na talk. Papua New Guinea is a black Christian nation. This Christian nation talk. And we must go down long. Constitution belong this country. And we must send up also one plan. Stepping stone belong you me or leader. Now we must backset long you me support me carry this country go forward. That's the important. People belong this country. Majority belong this country only Christian. You may look at something where me go situation and go out you mean on up. Police in on up make him one plus something. Defense in on up make him one plus something. But pray belong all majority long country. And me look out him and me give him peace. You may look him also something where criminal let me come up. Killing semi long come up. But hard long you may send him man. That's all talk long good. And me say send him man. And me say kiss him come back, sit down him all is away. Saranda na bien him straight la passing. Now you may talk long issue of country. And by go send his also one future generation by sit down good also one something but come up good blah and Bible let me sit down in long here. This plus something that's all by directing you long good road and by making people sit down good and by making country run good. You may sit down long here, talk long God and me stop in long this house. You may respect him this talk, country me run good. Thank you. This me, depends me. Thank you long you
Honorable members, our grievance debate time is over. The question is that the grievance debate be noted. Those in favor say aye. Those against say no. Ayes have it. The Minister for Fisheries.
Mr. Acting Speaker, I move that the Parliament do now adjourn until Tuesday, the 21st of March at 10 a.m.
The question is that the motion be agreed to. Those in favor say aye. Those against say no. Honourable members, before I adjourn Parliament, please be advised that the National Identity Registry staff will be conducting NID registration for members of Parliament who do not have NID cards in the State Function Room from 19 to 24th March, 8 o'clock a.m. to 4 p.m. If you have any issue with your NID registration, please visit the staff members so that they can attend to your concern. Honourable members, the Chair would like to wish you a safe weekend, and I now adjourn Parliament to 21st of March, 10 o'clock a.m.